We have a warrant. 3 words, that's all it takes. And the second you hear them, your brain goes blank. Your hands start shaking. And most people just open the door. That's exactly what they're counting on. Because here's the thing, not every warrant is valid. Not every warrant covers what they claim it covers. And moving before you check these 3 things could cost you rights you can never get back, ever. Most people don't even know they're allowed to pause. They don't know what to ask. They don't know that the warrant itself, that piece of paper in the officer's hand, can be your strongest defense or your worst enemy, depending entirely on what you do in the next 30 seconds. Stay right here, because what you do the moment you hear those 3 words that determines everything that comes after. Let me tell you how most people respond when they hear "we have a warrant," because it plays out 3 ways and all 3 are wrong. The first type of person, they just comply, immediately. They open the door, step back, and let them in. And look, I understand that instinct. Compliance feels safe. Compliance feels like it shows you have nothing to hide. But here's what nobody tells you. The moment you open that door before seeing that warrant, you've waived your right to challenge what they find inside. You didn't consent. But you moved too fast to protect yourself, and the law doesn't give you that moment back. The second type of person, they go the opposite direction. They get loud. They argue. They physically block the doorway. And listen, I get the anger. I do. But the second you raise your voice or put your body in that doorway, you've handed them a resisting charge. Now your warrant problem is the smallest problem you have. The obstruction charge, that one sticks on its own. Doesn't matter what happens with the warrant later. The third type of person, and this one is the most common, they ask, is this real? Is this actually a warrant? And then they stop there. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what makes a warrant valid or invalid. So the officer says yes, and they have no idea whether that answer is true or not. Asking if it's real without knowing what to check, that's not protection. That's just a question with nowhere to go. Now picture this. It's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. You're in your apartment in Atlanta. Maybe you've got a roommate in the back bedroom. Maybe you ordered food 20 minutes ago and you're half expecting a knock at the door. And then it comes, but it's not DoorDash. It's 2 officers. One of them holds up a piece of paper and says, "We have a warrant for this address." You have nothing to hide. Absolutely nothing. But in that moment, you have no idea what you're looking at. You don't know if that paper even covers your unit. You don't know what they're allowed to search. You don't know what you're allowed to ask. And that moment right there at that door, that is where everything gets decided. That is not a rare situation. That happens to regular people, decent people, people who did nothing wrong every single day in this country. Here's what most people never learn and what changes everything once you do. A warrant is a court order. It was reviewed and signed by a judge. But here's the part that matters. That judge only signed off based on specific information the officer brought to them. Which means the warrant has limits, hard limits, and those limits are written directly on that piece of paper. They're not hidden. They're right there if you know what to read. In most circumstances, especially at a home, officers are legally required to show you the warrant upon request before they execute it. That's not a loophole. That's the 4th Amendment. Unreasonable search and seizure. It's one of the oldest protections in American law, and most people have no idea it applies in that exact moment. Wait, actually, let me back up for 1 second, because I want you to understand why this matters beyond just your situation. Courts have thrown out evidence. They've dismissed entire cases. They've ruled searches completely illegal because the warrant had errors, simple errors. Errors that any regular person could have spotted if they had known what to look for, a wrong apartment number, an expired date, a missing signature, cases that should have gone to trial gone. Because the paperwork wasn't right. There's a documented case wrong address on the warrant. Officers showed up at the neighbor's house by mistake. The person opened the door, let them in, fully cooperated. Everything they found inside was eventually suppressed. The search was ruled illegal. But not before that person spent weeks dealing with the consequences of a search they never had to allow. They paid that price because they didn't know what to check at the door. So, before you move, before you open anything, here are the 3 things you check, right there, in real time, calmly, with your feet planted right where you're standing. The first thing you check is your name or your address actually on that warrant. A warrant must identify a specific person or a specific location. That's not optional, that's a legal requirement. If that warrant says apartment 4B and you're standing in apartment 4A, that warrant does not cover you. You are legally allowed to say that, calmly, clearly, immediately. You look at the paper, you check the address, and if it's wrong, you say, "Officer, I want to cooperate fully, but the address on this warrant doesn't match this unit." That's it. You don't argue, you don't block, you just state what you see. Think of it like checking a delivery. The driver shows up, hands you a package, you look at the label before you sign. That's not obstruction, that's common sense. Same thing here. The second thing you check, what is the scope of this warrant? A search warrant is not a blank check. It is not permission to search everything everywhere. It specifies exactly what they're authorized to search for and exactly where they're allowed to look. If the warrant says they're looking for a stolen television, they cannot legally open your medicine cabinet. They cannot go through your bedroom closet. If the scope covers the living room, it does not automatically extend to your locked bedroom. Scope means where and what. Nothing more, nothing less. And here's the thing, you don't have to be aggressive about this. You say, I'm not resisting, I just want to understand what the warrant covers. That one sentence does two things at the same time. It keeps you compliant and it puts your objection on the verbal record. Right there, in front of witnesses. The third thing you check, and this is the one people almost never think to look for, is the warrant signed and is it dated? A valid warrant must carry the signature of a judge or magistrate, and it must have a date. An unsigned warrant is not legally enforceable. An expired warrant is not legally enforceable. These aren't technicalities invented to let criminals walk free. These are the rules that protect everyone, every single person, including you. Now, you are not a lawyer. You don't need to argue any of this at the door. You don't need to cite case law or recite amendments. You just need to see it, look at it. Take note of what you see, because your attorney will ask you exactly these questions later, and what you observed in that moment could change the outcome of everything. Calm, flat, almost neutral. That's the energy. You're not scared. You're not aggressive. You're just a person who knows how to read a document. That stillness, that quiet composure, it takes leverage away from the situation. Nervous energy gives them more. Stillness gives you more. Let me walk you through exactly how this plays out, both ways. Best case, officer knocks. You go to the door. Officer says, we have a warrant, open the door. You say, I'm not resisting. Can I see the warrant before I open the door? Officer passes it through the window or holds it up. You look at it, you check the address, you check the scope, you check the signature and the date. Then you say, thank you. I see it signed. I want to comply fully. I just want it noted I'm doing so under the warrant's stated scope. That's it. You opened the door, you cooperated, and you just handed your attorney a complete verbal record of exactly what was authorized and what wasn't. You complied and protected yourself at the same time. Both, simultaneously. That is the goal. Now, worst case. Officer knocks hard. Officer says, we have a warrant, step aside now. You say, I'm stepping aside. I'm not resisting. I'm requesting to see the warrant. Officer says, you'll see it inside. And they push past you. You do not grab them. You do not block them. You do not touch anyone. You step back. And then clearly, calmly, loud enough to be heard, you say, I am not consenting to this search. I am complying under protest. Say it once, say it clearly, then stop talking. You have just created a legal record using your own voice. You didn't escalate, you didn't consent, and your attorney now has something real to work with. And if the officer turns around and says, stop asking questions and move, you say, I understand, I'm moving, I am not resisting. 2 sentences. That's the entire script. Because the fight is not at that door. The fight is in the courtroom. And what you just did in that hallway, in those 20 seconds, is exactly how you set yourself up to win it. Now, let's talk about what not to say, because 2 specific phrases, will destroy everything you just built. The first one, you can't come in here. The moment those words come out of your mouth, if they have a valid warrant, you've just committed obstruction. And here's what makes it dangerous. Even if the warrant turns out to be completely flawed later, that obstruction charge stands on its own. It is a separate offense. It does not disappear when the warrant gets thrown out. Don't say it, not once. Not under your breath, not quietly, not at all. The second phrase, fine, come in, I have nothing to hide. And look, I believe you. I genuinely believe most people who say that actually mean it. But that phrase legally functions as consent. The moment you say it, they no longer need the warrant. You just voluntarily invited them in. And a consent search has no scope, no limits, no boundaries. The warrant, whatever its flaws, at least confine them to specific areas. Your invitation threw every single one of those boundaries out the window. There was a man in Ohio, valid warrant, covered 1 room, just 1. He opened the door, sized up the situation, and said, come on in, I got nothing to hide. Officers entered. They used his consent, not the warrant, to search the entire residence. 2 rooms that were completely outside the warrant scope. Evidence found, case built, charges filed. All of it completely legal because he said 6 words he didn't have to say. The warrant that day was actually protecting him. It was limiting them to 1 room, and he gave it away with 1 sentence. He threw away his own protection without knowing it was there. Never say that. A warrant is a document, and like every document, it has rules, it has limits, and it has errors. You now know the 3 things to check before you move. You know what to say and exactly how to say it. You know the 2 phrases that will hand your rights over without you realizing it. And you know that the fight, the real fight, is never at that door. But here's what nobody ever talks about. What happens after they're already inside? Because there is a moment, a specific moment that most people have never heard of, where you can legally stop a search while it's happening. Mid-execution. Even with a valid warrant. Even after those officers have already walked through your door and started searching. That video is next. And if you thought this one mattered, that one changes the entire way you think about your rights at home. If nobody ever taught you any of this, that's exactly why this channel exists. the stuff they should have taught us, but didn't. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Consult a licensed attorney for your specific situation.